The key to the cabin was still on the same ring my grandpa used to keep on his belt, except now it lived in a padded envelope with my name on it, and a sticky note that said, "Hope you can do something with the place." My aunt's handwriting. I almost didn't come. Not because I was scared of the woods or the lake, but because I was scared of the feelings. The kind that show up when you're alone with someone else's old life and you start finding the little dents where they stood. But the cabin had been sitting for 2 years, and sitting is how places die. So, I took 3 days off work, loaded my truck with a tool bag, a case of bottled water, a cheap cooler, and the kind of optimism you only have when you haven't arrived yet. The driveway wasn't a driveway anymore. It was 2 muddy ruts and grass tall enough to slap my door handles. I got out twice to move fallen branches. The third time I got out, I stopped and just stared. The cabin was there, but it looked like it had been turned down to low brightness. Faded siding, dark windows, the porch sagging slightly, like it was tired. And behind it, the lake. It was the reason my grandparents bought the place, and it still did the same thing it always did. It sat there looking calm while it swallowed every sound you made. No motorboats, no kids, no one shouting from a dock. Just water and wind and the thin ticking of insects. I killed the engine and listened. A loon called somewhere out on the lake. That long, hollow sound that makes your stomach go a little tight, even when you're not in a horror story. I walked up to the porch and slid the key in. The lock fought me for a second, like it didn't recognize me anymore, then gave. Inside, the cabin smelled like cold wood, dust, and something faintly sweet that I couldn't place at first. Then I realized it was old cedar. My grandma used to tuck cedar blocks into the drawers like she was warding off time itself. The living room was the same layout, even with the furniture covered in sheets. Couch on the left, little lamp table, wood stove in the corner with a rusted kettle on top. My grandpa's fishing rod still leaned against the wall by the back door, their lines limp and slack like veins. I did what you do when you're trying not to get hit by memory. I got practical. I opened windows to air it out. I checked for obvious water damage. I walked the floor, listening for soft spots. I found mouse droppings in the pantry and swore quietly because, of course, there was no power. The old electric meter box outside had been pulled years ago, which my aunt had mentioned in her note like it was just a normal detail. Oh yeah, by the way, the cabin is fully dead. Fine. I had lanterns. I had a headlamp. I had one of those battery packs you can jump a car with that also runs a USB. I set up my little camp stove on the porch and boiled water for instant coffee. The kind my grandpa used to drink because coffee doesn't need to be fancy. While it brewed, I walked down to the shoreline. The dock was in pieces. Not completely destroyed, but the far end had broken and dipped into the water at a permanent angle. The boards near shore were gray and rough, sun-bleached and split. A few old nails stuck up like teeth. The lake water lapped at it softly. The water was dark. Not murky, just deep. You could see maybe a foot down near shore where the stones were, and then it went black like someone spilled ink. I squatted and ran my fingers through the pebbles, more habit than anything. There were bottle caps and old hooks mixed in, a broken plastic bobber, little relics. Then, I saw the first thing that didn't fit. On the wet sand just above the waterline, there were drag marks. They weren't footprints, more like 2 long, parallel smears, as if something had pulled itself out of the water and then slid back in. The sand between the smears was pressed down smooth. I stared at it for longer than I should have. My brain ran through options. Log, branch, someone dragging a kayak. Except there was no kayak, and the marks weren't fresh. They were damp but starting to dry at the edges, like they'd been made earlier in the day. I told myself it was a turtle. A big snapping turtle, maybe. People always underestimate those. They're basically prehistoric anger with legs. I stood up, washed my hands in the lake, and went back up to the cabin. Work makes you brave in a stupid way. It convinces you you're in control, because you're measuring and cutting and moving things. I spent the afternoon ripping up warped porch boards and replacing them with new ones I'd hauled in. I patched a corner of the screen on the porch where it had torn. I cleared leaves out of the gutter channel so rain had somewhere to go besides directly onto the porch ceiling. I found a coffee tin in the kitchen with my grandma's handwriting on it. Sugar. I opened it without thinking. It wasn't sugar anymore. It was clumped and yellow and smelled off. I shut it and left it on the counter like I was leaving her a message. I saw it. I remember. Around sunset, I ate a sandwich on the porch and watched the lake go flat. The surface turned into a mirror of bruised purple sky. The tree line on the opposite shore became one solid black shape. And that's when the noises started. The first one was faint. A wet slap somewhere near the dock. The kind of sound you hear when a fish jumps, but heavier, more deliberate. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, looking at the water. Nothing broke the surface. No ripples, no circles spreading out. A minute later, I heard it again. A wet slap. Then, a dragging sound, like something rough being pulled over stones. I sat up. Okay, I muttered. To nobody, because talking out loud keeps you sane for one more minute. I grabbed the headlamp off the porch table and shined it down toward the shoreline. The beam caught the dockboards, the rocks, the reeds. Everything looked exactly the same, just brighter and more suspicious. Nothing moved. The air got colder fast, and the insects ramped up like a static layer in the background. I went inside, shut the door, and latched it. I didn't latch it because I thought something would open it. I latched it because my grandpa always latched it at night, and my hands did what his hands used to do. I sat up on the couch again because the bedroom smelled like closed drawers and old fabric. The couch smelled like dust and cedar, which I could handle. Around 11:30, I was half asleep when the porch creaked. One slow, heavy groan. Not the normal wood-settling creak. This was weight. The board giving slightly under something. I sat up, heart kicking. The porch creaked again. Then I heard a soft tapping, right near the screen door. Not random. Not wind. Like knuckles. If knuckles were wet. I stared at the living room window, which looked out onto the porch. The glass reflected my own face back at me, pale in the lantern light. The tapping stopped. I waited, frozen. Then came a different sound. A scraping along the porch screen. Slow, patient, like someone dragging a nail across mesh. My mouth went dry. I turned the lantern down and clicked my headlamp on low, keeping the beam pointed at the floor. I moved to the living room window and leaned close enough that my breath fogged the glass. I angled the headlamp up slightly. The porch was empty. The screen door was closed. The patched section I'd stapled earlier was still tight. But on the porch boards, right in front of the screen door, there was something that wasn't there earlier. A wet streak. like a thick smear of lake water mixed with mud. It glistened in my headlamp beam, and it smelled through the glass, faintly, but enough. Fish, wet stone, a sharp metallic edge underneath it. The scraping started again, closer now, right on the screen door. I stepped back so fast I bumped the chair. The scraping stopped instantly, as if whatever was out there had heard the sound and decided it had confirmed something. Then, from somewhere down near the dock, came another wet slap. I didn't sleep much after that. I lay on the couch, headlamp off, lantern turned low, listening to the cabin settle and the lake make its quiet noises. Every creak made my muscles tighten. Sometime after 2 a.m., I heard something slide along the side of the cabin. Not footsteps, not paws. A low, smooth drag, like a heavy bag being pulled slowly across wet leaves. It stopped under the kitchen window. I held my breath. Then came a sound that made my stomach turn. A soft clicking, fast and rhythmic, like someone tapping their tongue against their teeth, like a throat trying to make words and failing. It went on for a few seconds, then stopped. The silence afterward felt like pressure in my ears. Morning came, gray and cold. I made coffee and forced myself to step outside, because I refused to be the guy scared of his own porch. The wet streak was still there, dried slightly now and leaving a faint, crusty outline. And at the bottom of the porch steps, in the muddy patch near the foundation, were marks. Not prints, not claws, impressions, like the edge of a shovel pressed into mud in a repeating pattern. Parallel ridges, as if something had braced itself there. I stood in the yard, coffee going cold in my hand, and tried to be normal. "Turtle," I said out loud, even though it didn't sound convincing. "Big turtle." I worked anyway. That day, I replaced 2 broken window panes with plastic sheeting stapled tight. I cleared vines off the side of the cabin. I found the old generator shed and opened it. The generator was gone. Just an empty concrete pad and a few rust stains. I found an old tackle box under the porch, the kind with trays. It was empty except for one thing. A folded, yellowed piece of paper. A handwritten note from my grandpa. Not for me. Probably for my grandma. "Don't go down to the inlet at night. Don't leave the fish on the porch. If you hear it clicking, come inside." That was it. No explanation, no signature, just those lines written like he didn't want to waste ink. My stomach went cold in a clean, simple way. There was an inlet. On the far side of the property, where the lake narrowed and fed into a little creek. The place I'd noticed was clogged with branches. I stood there for a long time with that note in my hand. My grandpa wasn't the kind of man who wrote spooky warnings. He was the kind of man who fixed screens, sharpened hooks, and treated problems like they were solvable if you were stubborn enough. So, why had he written this? That afternoon, I drove into town and bought 2 more motion lights, extra batteries, and one of those heavy-duty door bars that people use in hotels. The guy at the register asked if I was up at the lake cabins. I nodded. He said, "Watch the water line. It's been weird." He said it casually, like he was talking about algae. "What does that mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "People hear things. Something's been dragging up fish. Probably just a big snapping turtle." He smiled when he said snapping turtle, like that was the punchline. I didn't smile back. That night, I set the motion lights facing the porch and the side yard, angled toward the shoreline. I barred the front door from the inside. I kept my headlamp around my neck and a hatchet within arm's reach. I know how that sounds, but I wasn't sitting there like a hunter. I was sitting there like someone waiting for a noise you can't unhear. At 10:47, the porch motion light clicked on. Bright white light flooded the porch, turning the screen door into a pale rectangle. I sat up. The porch looked empty. The light stayed on for maybe 15 seconds and then clicked off. A minute later, it clicked on again. Empty again. Then the side yard motion light clicked on too, washing the grass and the base of the cabin in harsh light. Still nothing visible. It felt like something was testing the angles, moving just out of the sensor range, leaning in and out like a kid playing with a flashlight beam. My throat tightened. Then, the porch light clicked on and stayed on. I got up slow and moved to the living room window, keeping my body low and my headlamp off so I didn't reflect myself. The porch looked empty. But the screen door mesh, it was bowed inward slightly, like something was pressed against it on the outside. I leaned closer. A shape moved in the glow, low to the boards. Not a raccoon. Too big. Too smooth. It slid forward and, for one clean second, it lifted its head into the light. It looked like a lizard. That was my first thought, and I hate how simple that sounds because nothing about it felt simple. It was the size of a large dog, but built wrong for land. Heavy body, belly low, skin dark and ridged in overlapping plates that shone wet under the motion light. Along its neck and down its spine were pale frills, translucent like thin rubber, fluttering slightly as if they were sensing vibrations more than wind. Its head was broad and flat, eyes small and set back, reflecting dully. Mouth too wide, the corners pulled back further than they should have been. It stared through the screen door like it understood doors. Then it clicked. Fast and wet, a rapid series of sounds that made my teeth ache. I stepped back involuntarily and the floor creaked. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. It moved closer to the screen door in one smooth surge, faster than its body looked like it should move. The screen door bowed inward. Then came a heavy thump as it hit the screen. The latch held, but the entire frame rattled. I backed up to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and saw I had 2 bars of service. I should have called 911 right then. Instead, I did the stupidest thing I've ever done, because I had my grandpa's note in my pocket like a challenge. I grabbed the hatchet and the headlamp, unlocked the porch door behind the screen door, and told myself out loud, just scare it off. The moment I cracked the inner door, the smell hit me. It smelled like fish and wet stone, and that sharp metallic edge like blood on pennies. The creature was no longer on the screen. The porch was empty. The motion light stayed on, illuminating nothing but the wet streaks on the boards. I stepped onto the porch anyway, because my brain had already committed, and backing down felt worse than moving forward. My headlamp beam swept down to the steps, then to the ground. Nothing. Then I heard it from below. Not on the porch, under it. A sliding sound through damp leaves, low and close. I turned my headlamp toward the shoreline and caught movement between the rocks. It rose out of the shallows slowly, water sheeting off its back. It had been waiting where the light couldn't reach. It launched. It didn't run. It exploded forward in a sudden burst of muscle and wet force, hitting the bottom porch steps and coming up fast. I swung the hatchet, not skillfully, not like I knew what I was doing. Pure reflex. The blade glanced off a ridge on its shoulder with a hard, dull clack that sent a shock through my arms. It snapped at me. Its jaws opened wider than they should have. The hinge flexed like rubber. Rows of small, needle-like teeth sat further back than I expected, like something built to grip and pull, not chew. It clamped onto my left forearm. Pain detonated, hot and immediate, like a vise with knives inside it. I screamed and slammed the hatchet handle into its head. Not the blade, just dull impact. It released with a wet pop and jerked back, clicking rapidly, agitated. Blood ran down my wrist and into my palm. My fingers tingled and went half numb. It lunged again. I stumbled backwards off the porch steps. My heel caught the edge. I fell hard into the dirt, shoulder first. The world spun. My headlamp beam went wild, slicing ferns and tree trunks and the side of the cabin. The creature came down after me, low and fast. Before I could get up, it raked across my rib with those blunt nails, tearing through my shirt in parallel lines. It wasn't a deep, cinematic slash. It was worse in a different way. Multiple shallow tears that burned instantly and started to bleed, like the skin had been peeled open. I kicked. My boot connected with its jaw and it clicked louder, snapping. Then it bit my boot and yanked. My ankle rolled sideways in the dirt. A bright, sick pain shot up my leg. I made a sound that didn't feel human. The creature released my boot and lifted its head, tilting it like it was deciding where to bite next. In the headlamp glow, I could see its throat moving as it clicked, and I could see the frills along its neck fluttering as if they were tasting the air. I grabbed a fistful of gravel and threw it at its eyes. It flinched. Not much, but enough. I crawled backward on my good leg, dragging the bad one, leaving a smear in the dirt. I hit the porch steps and hauled myself up, hands slipping on wet boards, wet from it and from me. I got inside and slammed the inner door, then the screen door, and locked both with shaking hands. The creature hit the screen door once, hard, rattling the frame. Then it went still. I stood in the kitchen, blood dripping onto the old linoleum, ribs on fire, arm throbbing, ankle screaming, and I waited for the next slam. Instead, I heard that clicking again, slower now, almost thoughtful. Then, the porch motion light clicked off. Darkness returned like someone turned the world back down. I didn't stay to see what it would do next. I grabbed my keys, phone, and nothing else. I didn't pack. I didn't think. I limped out the front door, not the porch, and staggered toward my truck. The yard felt huge. The lake felt closer than it should. Behind me, I heard that wet sliding sound again. Not rushing. Following. I made it to the truck, fumbled my keys, dropped them, found them, got the door open and threw myself into the driver's seat. My ribs screamed when I twisted. My ankle screamed when I pressed the pedal. I started the engine and the headlamps washed the cabin in white. The porch motion light clicked on again. And there it was. Halfway up the porch steps, crouched in the pool of light, watching my truck like it was memorizing the shape of it. It didn't charge. It didn't panic. It just watched. I reversed hard enough to spray gravel, then drove until pavement showed up under my tires and the trees thinned. That's when I noticed the smell hadn't stayed at the cabin. It was in my truck. Fish and wet stone, faint but real, coming off my clothes and the inside of the cab like I'd brought the shoreline with me. At a stop sign under a streetlight, I looked down and saw a dark smear on the rubber floor mat by the pedals. Not mud, not just water. Something thicker, with a slight sheen to it, and embedded in it, like it had been pressed there when I stomped the brake, was a small, dark piece of something hard. Scale? That's the only word I have for it. Oval, ridged, about the size of my thumbnail, dark as bottle glass. It caught the streetlight and reflected dully, like it didn't want to be noticed. I stared at it until someone honked behind me and I jerked forward, heart hammering all over again. At urgent care, I told them I fell and got bitten by an animal. I let them make their own mental picture. I didn't say lake. I didn't say lizard. I said animal because I wanted stitches and not a lecture. They cleaned the bite, stitched it, wrapped my ribs, and put my ankle in a boot. When the nurse irrigated the bite, she paused and frowned. "What is that?" she asked. She leaned closer with her forceps and pinched something out of the wound. It made my stomach flip. She dropped it into a little metal tray. It wasn't gravel. Not exactly. It looked like a tiny black sliver, hard and ridged, like a fragment of nail or scale, wet, dark, wrong in the fluorescent light. "Probably debris," she said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. I didn't answer. A week later, I went back in daylight with 2 friends, a proper first aid kit, and a plan. Board it up and get out. The porch looked normal in sunlight. The cabin looked tired, not haunted. But the porch boards had long, shallow grooves in them near the steps, like something with weight and ridged skin had gripped and pulled itself up repeatedly. And on the kitchen table where I'd left my tool bag, there was a dried wet streak. Fishy, metallic. Beside it, pressed faintly into the wood, were parallel ridge marks, like the edge of a shovel, like the impressions in the mud. My friend joked, "Snapping turtle," and laughed. I didn't laugh. Because the drag marks on the shoreline were there again, fresh, leading from the water straight up toward the porch steps. And the creek mouth on the far side of the property, the inlet my grandpa warned about, looked more clogged than before. Like something had been pushing branches into place. Like a door being shut. And before we left, I checked my truck floor mat. The smear by the pedals had dried into a dark crust, and the scale was gone. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed today's story. This one's written by an author who I really enjoy, Pentyworth223 on Reddit. Their real name, Justice Figueroa. And they also have a new website out right now, if you're interested in checking it out. It's called darkarchivehq.com, and he's got a lot of his work up there. He's going to be including more as time goes on as well. Also links to his books and some merch over there. So I hope you'll check out darkarchivehq.com and give some love to the author, Justice Figueroa, for writing this great story, as well as many others which I feature on the channel. Gonna have more work by this author coming up soon as well. The Skin Man series, written by this author. I should have the final installment of that soon, and I'll also be featuring a compilation of that entire series on the channel. In Hollow's End book news, the Hollow's End book is going to be out this Wednesday. Actually, Tuesday the 30th at midnight Eastern Standard Time. You can order the book on Amazon. So I'll have links on the channel as well as on Patreon, other social media, as soon as I have links available for paperback and hardcover editions. The Kindle ebook edition is available for pre-order, so I'll put some links in the description and the pinned comment as well for that, if anybody's interested in pre-ordering that before it comes out. But yeah, I'm really excited for that book to come out this Wednesday, July 1st. And Justice Figueroa was actually involved in that, doing the cover art for the new Hollow's End book. So hugely appreciate him doing that. And I think him and Marcus Lambert, the other author, did a really fantastic job with the cover. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you check it out. I think they captured the vibes of Hollow's End really well with that. That's about it for me today. Going to have another story coming this Wednesday, as well as, like I mentioned before, links for the Hollow's End book, which will be coming out this Wednesday. For anybody who's not aware, we did switch the schedule up a little bit on the channel here. So now we're coming out with new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rather than previously I was doing like 5-6 days a week, and just really wasn't sustainable, as well as also a huge red flag for YouTube, from what I've heard, for their AI moderation. So trying to keep it to this Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, as well as doing some bonus videos on the days off. I just posted a bonus video yesterday for members here, as well as for Patreon members and Spotify members. So if you're interested, you can check that out in the members section. Just hit the join button. All right, that's about it for me today, and I'll see you guys again this Wednesday. Hope you have a great rest of your day.